I am Rick Thompson, one of the founders of Greentech Media. I'm just going to spend 10 minutes or so with some opening remarks before we get the program started. So let's see, just a little bit about kind of today's conference, a few overview points. We've got about 240 folks here from various segments of the market representing the technology vendors, utilities, regulators, and many more players and decision makers in the market. So it should be a good opportunity to obviously hear from the experts that we have speaking and network with other attendees that are here in the audience. So we've got over 40 hand-picked speakers from a really nice mix of companies, both vendor and utility, a few regulators and other kind of industry organizations, and we tend to try to get a mixture of both kind of smaller startups that are doing new and interesting things, but also kind of larger companies that have been in this market for years and are really entrenched with utilities and their evolving business models. So the sessions are curated really specific to what we kind of view as the most pressing topics in the soft grid. We have a team of analysts that obviously do research in this area and really help to kind of define the agenda and pick the right speakers. So hopefully that'll come through throughout the program today and tomorrow in the intelligence of the questions and the discussion that goes on. We've got a couple interesting morning presentations. This morning we'll hear from O-Power, and tomorrow morning we'll hear from Nest. So two, I think, quite interesting companies that are newer to the scene, I would say. And then this afternoon, a great keynote speaker, Elizabeth Brinton, in her new position as VP of Corporate Strategy at PG&E, will be with us. She has spoken at some of our other conferences before. She used to be with SMUD and spent some time with some technology vendors and was recently named as an executive at PG&E. So we're very, very happy to have her this afternoon. I'd like to take a second to just thank all of our sponsors. Specifically, I'd like to thank SRI for hosting us here in this venue today. I'd like to thank PG&E. They're our host utility. Obviously be speaking on the agenda, and I think they've got several folks that'll be here in the audience as well. And specifically, I'd like to thank O-Power, our platinum sponsor. They're also going to be speaking on the agenda and are hosting a champagne networking reception at the end of the day today. So, and then we've got a great collection of other sponsors that are here with us today that are going to be, many of them will be speaking throughout the agenda. So soft grid is a term that we coined, maybe 3 years ago or so. We were, obviously looking at smart grid infrastructure and all of the, hardware and software aspects that went into that. And then I'd say 3 years ago or so, we saw a definite, uptick in the development of analytics and big data tools and, other, software applications, sitting on top of the infrastructure. That kind of was the catalyst to launch this conference. And over the course, I would say, the last couple of years, we also have a large solar market research business and solar conference business, and we cover both kind of grid infrastructure and solar power generation on our news website. And those two worlds have been coming together, I would say, pretty interestingly over the last 18 months or so in terms of integrating high penetration of solar PV onto the grid, what that means to the grid infrastructure, what type of not only hardware infrastructure are you going to need to do that reliably, but moreover, there's a lot of interesting software that's happening on top of, not just the grid infrastructure, but also the consumer side of things. And that kind of, we generated this kind of cube taxonomy called the Grid Edge taxonomy. And it's at the lowest layers, it's the physical infrastructure. On kind of the left side of the cube is really the distribution grid infrastructure, and on the right side is kind of everything behind the meter. You can kind of consider that edge there, the meter, as a point of demarcation. And then the top layer is really kind of the shifting market landscape in terms of services, the evolution of the utility business model, and everything that kind of goes along with the juncture of these markets coming together. But sitting atop the physical infrastructure, you often have networking and control. And then you have kind of an application layer, similar to the OSI stack and the internet. And sitting above that is really where we're going to be focusing today, on the kind of data and analytics layer. So what type of new applications, what type of new services can be generated from the adding of intelligence, whether it be communications interfaces, whether it be intelligent sensors that you're collecting data from, whether it be devices behind the meter, home smart appliances, smart inverters, PV systems, intelligent storage. They're all going to play a role in creating vast amounts of data for not only the utility but the consumer and potentially some third-party service providers to develop new services and applications for the utility of the future. So that's obviously kind of like the focal point of the entire program. Just a couple slides on some market sizing that we had done around this kind of soft grid space. Soft grid is a little bit loosely defined, so it includes things like data and analytics, but it also includes other types of software applications. We can get into details of some of these charts, offline if anyone would like to. But the thing to point out here is if you look, over the course of the next 5 years, we've done kind of a conservative estimate in the dark blue and kind of a higher end estimate in the lighter blue. But if you look out 5 years, it has the opportunity to be $1 billion market just in North America alone, and that's predominantly in the U.S. So if you take a look at that based on what are the different types of analytics that kind of are broken down into those bigger numbers, and this is just mainly the base case scenario, the more conservative scenario, you can see that predominantly the majority of the opportunity that we're seeing is in consumer analytics and grid analytics. So those are like two big buckets of analytics that we define and look at, and we've got folks from various market vendors and technology solution providers here today that'll focus maybe more on the grid side. How can they use analytics to better optimize grid operations, and then others that are looking more on the consumer side. How can you increase consumer engagement? How can you introduce new services based on the data that's now becoming available based on the equipment that's out there? A quick note on the Grid Edge Executive Council, which we launched just about a year ago. We had several meetings per year. It's more of a private group that talks about many of these shifts in the business model around this whole grid edge theme, analytics being a big part of that. We had a meeting yesterday in Menlo Park, and many of these folks were there, and we were discussing use cases for analytics, some of the top use cases, and we'll be able to share some of that throughout the program as well. But we've grown to just over 70 members now, I believe, 70 companies, over 100 members in the council, and it continues to grow. We've been adding a number of utilities, I would say, in the past 6 months, and probably a little bit more interest in some storage as well. We've recently hired a senior storage analyst, and storage is starting to pick up, and it may start to ride a curve similar to how PV growth has in the past few years. It might take a little bit longer, but I think we're at the very beginning of that, especially here in California. And that's an interesting topic, and we've got a session on specifically around intelligent storage. There's a lot of work that's been going on for years around the chemistry and the things like that around and the cost and the manufacturing of storage. But once you start to get those problems solved and put it into this complex network, managing that storage, understanding data and analytics that are being generated from those types of devices are going to be playing a big role going forward, and the council covers that in addition to many other topics. So a couple just notes before I introduce our speakers for the fireside chat. A few things that are kind of upcoming from Greentech Media and GTM Research, and these are more kind of focused on the grid side of what we do, and we've got a whole parallel list, probably even longer on the solar side. But the next Grid Executive Council meeting will be on December 11th, tied with our U.S. Solar Market Insight Conference in San Diego, and the topic is really going to be around what does this next generation utility look like from a business model perspective, and how is that enabled from a regulatory perspective. Some new research that we've got coming out over the course of the next several weeks to next month or so. We've got a report on distributed energy resource management systems, DERMS, coming out in the next few weeks. Got a report on advanced demand response coming out, and one on intelligent storage management, in addition to other titles to be following these. We're putting together our 2015 Grid Edge executive calendar as we speak. So we held about 4 meetings this year. We'll probably hold a few more next year and spread them around the country a bit, looking at potentially regional issues where maybe PV isn't the big issue in the Northeast, but perhaps reliability around superstorms or things like that could be major issues. So we're putting that whole calendar together as we speak. If anyone has interest in understanding more about the council, what the agenda is, we'd be happy to talk to you about that. We're expanding our news coverage. We're expanding the team, and with that, the opportunity for different types of online marketing opportunities and just great coverage for our readers. We're working on a new mobile web experience from GTM that'll be rolled out in the not too distant future, and with that, some other interesting features and design changes from Greentech Media, so just stay tuned on our website for those types of things. And then Grid Edge Live, this is an interesting conference. It's a little bit smaller, more intimate, a little bit more focused specifically on the software layer. Grid Edge Live is really our big annual conference where we pull all of those topics together into a multi-day conference. We held our first one in San Diego in June. We had around 400 folks there, and we're already planning our 2015 version of that also to be held in San Diego in June of 2015. And you'll even though there's a lot of interesting and specific things around analytics at the soft grid, there will be an entire track of that type of content at Grid Edge Live 2015. So those are just some of the things we're working on going forward. So stay tuned on the website and in our newsletter. And I'm really happy to have all of you here today, and I'm happy to have such a great group of speakers with us. And with that, I would like to introduce Jeff St. John and our speakers for the fireside chat. So I think they're